He laughed at me in front of 9 men in suits and a camera crew like I was the punchline of a country club roast. I hadn't even finished the sentence, just mid-sentence, cut me off and said, "I don't care who you are. You're not the one closing this deal." Like I was the janitor who'd wandered into the boardroom. That was the moment I knew this pitch was going to be war. Not just $480 million on the line, not just a record-breaking public-private partnership, not just a deal that could carry our entire firm into the next decade. It was personal now. Craig Donnelly made sure of it. The irony? I built the damn project from the ground up. 14 months of trench work. Late nights, red lines, union negotiations, federal compliance strategy, and hundreds of hours herding subcontractors with egos bigger than their trucks. But Craig, golden boy from Dartmouth with a perfect jawline and a resume that reads like a senator's LinkedIn fantasy, couldn't stand that someone like me, self-taught, Midwest bred, more grit than gloss, was the one leading the proposal. He'd barely looked at me during our initial sessions until it became clear my name was on every milestone. Then he started trying to erase me. Before I go further, if you're listening to this and want more stories like it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a like. It really does make a difference and helps the team keep telling the stories corporate HR hopes you never hear. Anyway, Craig wasn't subtle. At first, it was backhanded comments. Things like, "Your team does surprisingly clean work for not being Ivy-led," or "You're sharp. Did you go to one of the lesser Ivies?" The first time, I gave him a polite smile and redirected the conversation. The third time, I stopped replying at all. I don't rise to bait. I document it, but it wasn't just him. The power dynamic from the client side was shifting. Craig had been bumped up as interim hiring authority after their original point person retired 2 months early, and suddenly, he had teeth. His decisions could sway approvals, and he knew it. Worse, he knew I knew it. I'd been on enough joint federal-private committees to spot someone who wasn't just ambitious, but dangerous. Craig wanted a legacy deal, something he could ride all the way to some White House sub-agency gig. And I was the inconvenient woman standing between him and the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Still, I stayed focused. There's a discipline you build when you've spent your life proving you belong in rooms no one saved a chair for. You keep your hands clean, your files meticulous, your strategy sharper than the smirks they throw your way. I wasn't just representing my firm, I was representing every competent woman who's ever been told to smile while a boy with cufflinks interrupts her for the 5th time in a meeting she led. So I led. Quietly, effectively, and without needing to chest pound. And the pitch? It was coming together. Despite Craig's little interruptions and subtle undermining, the infrastructure package we designed had cleared every internal review, passed state compliance audits, and even gotten a quiet nod from the governor's office liaison. This was going to close. We were in the red zone. But I couldn't shake the feeling, like a wire humming under the floorboards. Craig wasn't done. Men like him never are. And somewhere deep in my gut, I knew. I hadn't seen the worst of him yet. The prep session was supposed to be routine. Walk through with the joint task force, align on presentation flow, finalize talking points before the final pitch. I had our slide deck dialed in to the minute, 10-minute infrastructure overview, 8-minute compliance roadmap, 5-minute Q&A buffer. Clean, tight, no fluff. I had a blazer over my shoulders, hair pulled back, notes in my left hand, coffee in my right. Craig walked in 15 minutes late with a grin like he'd just been knighted, holding court like the goddamn messiah of procurement. I greeted him with a firm nod, launched into the timeline, and didn't even get through the second slide before he cut me off with that high-pitched scoff some men use when they want the room to know they're above whatever's happening. "Let's not waste time," he said, rolling his eyes toward the ceiling. "I don't care who you are. This is getting fast-tracked, not debated." Silence fell like a slap. Even the junior consultant from DOT stiffened in her seat. I didn't flinch. I just stared at him, then clicked to the next slide like I hadn't just been publicly gut-checked. My pulse was thunder, but my voice didn't crack. I said, "Noted. Slide 3, timeline revisions per federal compliance." He smirked, like he'd won something. After the meeting, my inbox pinged with his follow-up. It looked innocent to the untrained eye. "Appreciate the detail, but please leave final sign-off routing to leadership. No need to get too involved in policy layers. Stick to your strength zones." That emoji was the cherry on top. Just enough plausible deniability to dodge HR if I raised a flag, but every line reeked of condescension. Stick to your strength zones. I wrote the zones. I enforced the zones. I'd buried 2 failed deals under those zones and still slept fine. That night, I opened a new folder on my hard drive. Donnelly, interactions, time-stamped, indexed. I copied the email chain, saved the slide deck with his markups, and jotted down my memory of the prep session word for word. I didn't rage type. I documented every email, every snide comment, every deviation from process. It wasn't vengeance, not yet. It was insurance. Women like me don't get the luxury of exploding. We build files. I didn't tell anyone. Not legal, not compliance, not even my COO, who once told me she wished she had my calm under fire. There was no fire yet. Just smoke curling at the edges. But that smoke was familiar, and I knew where it led. It was a Tuesday morning when I realized Craig had moved from snide to strategic. I was halfway through budget reconciliation when my junior infrastructure lead, Maya, forwarded me an email with the subject line, "Next steps." It took me a second to register what I was looking at. Craig had emailed her directly on her personal account, pitching a career opportunity to join the client team post-deal. He wrote like it was a casual favor. "Your insight's been invaluable. We're planning an internal reshuffle, and I'd love to get your input. Strictly confidential, of course." But it wasn't subtle. He included phrases like future leadership trajectory and you'd be better utilized on the policy side, and then, just bold as brass, this would be a clean lateral post-contract, no conflict if it's kept quiet. Except he didn't BCC it properly. Somehow he'd accidentally included a second recipient in the thread, a deputy coordinator from our client's compliance team, someone I'd worked with before, someone who knew damn well what that kind of language meant. I didn't respond. Not to Maya, not to Craig, not even to the accidental CC. I just saved it, added it to the folder. I told Maya to keep her head down and forward me anything else that even hinted at side-channel communication. She nodded, clearly rattled. I could tell she didn't want to be part of whatever game he was playing, but she was young and Craig was dangling status like bait on a hook, the kind that leaves a scar even if you don't bite. Later that same day, around 7:42 p.m., I remember the timestamp because I stared at it like it was a gun pointed at my career. I got an email directly from Craig. No subject. Just one line in the body. "Get out of the way or get buried. This is my deal now." No signature. Just that. Like we were in some noir film and he thought he was the corrupt cop with a badge and no conscience. I didn't reply. I printed it. Twice. Once for the file, once for my lawyer. See, tucked into the third appendix of the deal's draft was a clause. A quiet little paragraph that most people would skim unless they'd spent years navigating procurement red tape. It was part of the conflict disclosure protocol, section 14C specifically. It stated that any attempt by a client-side actor to recruit, intimidate, or manipulate vendor-side staff prior to deal closure would constitute grounds for immediate disqualification. That clause was there because of past abuse that looked almost identical to what I was seeing now. I stared at the printed email in my hands, teeth clenched so tight my jaw cracked. Rage doesn't feel like fire. It feels like gravity, like every bone in your body pulling inward at once. I could have walked into the CEO's office right then, dropped the letter on her desk, and lit the whole deal on fire. But I didn't. Not yet. There's a timing to this kind of war, and Craig had no idea he'd just handed me the fuse. Instead, I picked up my phone and called our general counsel. No voicemail, no warm-up, just, "I need 20 minutes of your time, now." And when he asked what it was regarding, I said the words I knew would make him cancel everything else that day. Conflict of interest, procurement manipulation, documentation ready. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm down the hallway or slam doors. That's not how you win in rooms built to ignore you. You win by being quieter than their comfort allows, by knowing where the lines are, and making damn sure they're the ones who cross them. I met with our general counsel, Mitchell, in a closed conference room 2 floors up from the main offices. No assistants, no notes left behind. Just him, a yellow legal pad, and the kind of silence you don't break unless you're ready to mean it. I slid the file across the table. He didn't ask what it was, just opened it and started reading. 3 minutes in, he muttered, Jesus Christ, this guy's reckless. I didn't nod. I didn't need to. He kept flipping through the pages, Craig's side-channel email to Maya, the one-liner threat, the full timeline of prior interactions, down to my detailed notes from the day he first said, "I don't care who you are." I had dates. I had recipients. I had tone. Women like me always do. Mitchell leaned back after 15 minutes and tapped a line in the contract. Section 14C. He underlined it twice. If even one instance of this behavior is verified, and I mean verified, not just rumored, they can lose the contract. That's why the clause is buried in Appendix D. It's a nuclear kill switch. Never been used on our side before. I asked him one question. Can we validate the thread without triggering exposure? He looked at me over his glasses. We'll move it through client compliance, quietly. I know who to ping. They'll see the context and handle the internal review without making noise. You stay out of it officially, until I say otherwise. From there, the machine started turning, slow, silent, deliberate. I reached out to Marcy, our contact at the client's oversight division. She'd worked with me on the Edison project 3 years back, knew my reputation, knew I didn't flag issues unless they were real. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. She said she'd review the communication logs internally, for cross-team clarity, she phrased it. Bless her. I knew exactly what that meant. Meanwhile, Mitchell ran point on our side. He looped in compliance and 2 more senior legal advisors. No paper trail with my name on it. They began compiling every comms exchange Craig had touched, pulling metadata, timestamps, access records. The beauty of arrogance is it rarely hides its footprints. Craig left enough in those emails to bury a lesser man. All I had to do was wait while the truth sharpened itself. Cold replaced the fury. I stopped clenching my jaw. I stopped replaying the humiliation of that prep meeting. I even stopped reacting when Craig walked past my desk with that smug, empty smirk. Because now I wasn't just angry. I was prepared. There's something terrifyingly effective about restraint. About knowing you hold the weapon but refusing to swing it until the exact second the world is watching. Craig thought he'd backed me into a corner. He didn't realize I'd built the damn walls around him. Brick by brick, clause by clause. And soon, he'd learn that not every war is fought out loud. Some end in whispers. The break came in the form of an anxious knock at my office door. 3 short taps. Hesitant. I looked up and saw Erin, one of our junior analysts, hovering like she was about to apologize for breathing air. I waved her in. She sat, fingers twisting the fabric of her sleeve, and said, "I think you need to know something." She'd been at a post-lunch vendor walkthrough 2 days earlier, shadowing Craig and one of his logistics consultants. It was just supposed to be a logistics dry run, but Craig, apparently unaware or unconcerned about who was within earshot, made a comment, loud enough for at least 3 people to hear. Erin recited it word for word. We're phasing her out after the pitch anyway. No point giving the pit bull the steering wheel. Pit bull. I could almost appreciate the metaphor if it wasn't laced with that thin sheen of venom only men like Craig knew how to spit without blinking. But the phrase wasn't the part that mattered. It was the intent. Erin said the consultant looked visibly uncomfortable. One of the vendors, a neutral third party, reportedly blinked hard and stepped away like he wanted no part in what was clearly a setup, which meant there were witnesses, which meant we had confirmation, verbal threat, premeditated removal of a vendor lead mid-procurement. That, paired with his emails, wasn't just unethical. It was scorched earth disqualifying. I thanked Erin, reassured her she wouldn't be named or exposed, and documented everything in bullet point detail. Location, date, time, people present, phrasing, body language. The file was now 52 pages long. What started as a gut instinct was now a precision-aimed dossier. Later that night, while cross-referencing Craig's agency history, because patterns matter, I stumbled across a procurement committee summary from 2 years prior. It was archived, buried under a tangle of renamed PDFs. But the moment I saw his name, I knew. Craig Donnelly, Subject of internal ethics review at the National Utility Task Force for undisclosed back-channel negotiations and improper staff referrals. He wasn't disciplined, of course. Those guys never are. But he was quietly transferred out, swept under the rug. Lateral moved and rebranded. They'd left just enough evidence behind for people like me to find. So I did what I always do. I built the timeline, inserted the quotes, linked the personnel references. Then I composed one email, concise, calm, clinical, and attached the full documentation. I addressed it to Mitchell with CCs to the compliance team, legal liaison, and our oversight contact. No editorializing, no anger. Just one sentence beneath the attachment. Please confirm that the criteria outlined in Section 14C are now considered met. It took Mitchell 11 minutes to reply. All it said was, confirmed. Reviewing with counsel in the morning. I sat back in my chair and exhaled for the first time in weeks. Not in triumph, not even in relief. Just in the knowledge that the truth, when laid out clean, without exaggeration, had weight. My hands weren't shaking. My voice hadn't been raised. And still, somehow, the walls were beginning to close in around Craig Donnelly. Not because I shouted, but because I'd made damn sure that when the truth dropped, it would fall like a stone. The pitch room was carved from glass and arrogance. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished stone table, filtered still water lined up like we were prepping for a silent auction. Craig walked in first, smug as ever, flanked by two of his guys in tailored charcoal suits that probably cost more than my car. He gave me that performative nod, meant to acknowledge me just enough to signal condescension. I didn't return it. I was already seated, folder closed, pen uncapped, hands folded like I was here for the autopsy, not the surgery. Across from me, our CEO sat composed but taut, like she knew something was about to shift and didn't want to blink first. Mitchell, our general counsel, was 2 chairs to my left, calm, unreadable, and next to him was Evelyn Wu, compliance officer and federal liaison, whose expression could have cracked granite. She didn't smile when Craig walked in. That was the first omen. Craig opened strong. Too strong. The kind of performative authority you only use when you're compensating for something. He launched into the opening remarks like he'd authored every page of the pitch deck himself, which he hadn't. I watched him spin my infrastructure flowcharts into vague executive buzzwords, butcher my federal alignment matrices with phrases like best practices synergy, and completely ignore the environmental offset plan I'd spent 3 weekends finalizing. That was intentional. He was trying to white out my fingerprints. Then, as he pivoted to the closing portion, he gestured toward me like I was part of the furniture. And of course, she helped assemble much of the groundwork. But let's be honest, final approval's not her lane. Then came the kicker. He looked right at me, smiled like a frat boy who'd just taken your chair, and said, "You're not even on the final approval list, are you?" The room held its breath. I didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't even shift in my seat. I just reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and turned the screen toward Mitchell. The email was open. Craig's original one-liner, "Get out of the way or get buried. This is my deal now." Highlighted, timestamps, metadata intact. Mitchell didn't flinch. He took the phone like I'd handed him a matchstick, and he already knew where the gas was. He read it once, scrolled, saw the thread with the staff poach attempt, and then leaned slowly toward the CEO. He whispered something so quiet I could barely catch it, but I didn't need to. I knew the script. Across the table, Evelyn's eyes didn't leave Craig. She simply folded her hands and said, "Pause here. We need to suspend the session." Her voice was surgical, precise, lethal. Craig's grin faltered for the first time. "Excuse me?" Mitchell spoke this time. Calm, cool, deadly. Per the conditions of Section 14C, we're invoking a halt for review of conduct disclosures, effective immediately. Craig's face drained color like a plug had been pulled behind his eyes. He looked at me, not with anger, not with defiance, but confusion. Like he couldn't believe someone like me had the power to end his performance mid-stage, like he still thought it was his show. I finally looked back at him. Briefly, flatly, no expression, no words. Just long enough for him to understand that the room was no longer his, that whatever power he thought he'd held had just been revoked in silence. My hands were steady, my breath even, but the tremor wasn't mine. It was rippling across the other side of the table, where men in suits began shifting, whispering, realizing they were sitting next to a live wire they hadn't seen sparking. Not until it was too damn late. Mitchell kept the phone in his hand, still scrolling. Not fast, not performative, just deliberate. He tapped once, zoomed into a header, then backtracked through the metadata chain I'd compiled over weeks. Everything I'd logged, every thread, every breath Craig had wasted trying to sideline me, it was all there, layered and time-stamped with the kind of precision that made lawyers breathe differently. The room was dead quiet. Then came the whisper. Soft, low, designed not to travel far, but it landed like a verdict. Mitchell leaned toward our CEO, eyes still on the screen, and said, "Kill the deal. Now." Our CEO blinked once. That was it. No gasp, no dramatic hand signals, just one blink, then her hand moved, 2 fingers tapping the table, signaling to the moderator. She leaned forward and said, voice flat as a courtroom door, "We're halting the pitch. This matter is now under formal compliance review." Craig's lips parted like he wanted to protest, but the words got stuck in his throat. I saw it, the split-second reckoning behind his eyes. He still hadn't seen the hammer, but he could feel the air shift, heavy with consequence. Evelyn didn't wait for him to catch up. "This meeting is suspended. I'm requesting the room be cleared immediately," she said, already rising. "Please leave all documentation materials in place. Phones off. We'll follow up with your counsel." Craig stood but didn't move. He looked like someone had yanked the wiring out from behind his skull, pale, static, hands twitching at his sides like they didn't know what to hold on to anymore. Everyone else in the room moved in silence. The moderators, the agency reps, the junior execs on both sides. They filed out without a word, the way people do when they know something sacred just broke and no one wants to step on the shards. No one looked at me. No one had to. I stayed seated. I didn't look at Craig. Not yet. Not because I was being kind, but because I didn't need to. I could feel him watching me, waiting for the punishment to look like punishment. But I wasn't going to give him that comfort. This wasn't about performance. This was about truth. Quiet, surgical, unstoppable. As the glass doors eased shut behind the last person and the lights above dimmed to standby mode, I finally let the breath leave my chest. Controlled. Precise. My hands were still folded. My folder still closed. Craig still standing, and I still hadn't said a single word to him, because when you know the fuse is lit, you don't scream. You wait for the blast to arrive on its own. By the end of the week, the deal was in cryogenic suspension. Official language was pending internal investigation of procedural discrepancies, but everyone on the inside knew exactly what it meant. Craig Donnelly had detonated his own career with a single sentence, and I'd made sure the fuse stayed dry long enough to burn clean. He was placed on immediate administrative leave. The agency's announcement came in a 6-line memo. No frills, no apologies, no public naming. Just, effective immediately, Craig Donnelly will be on leave pending an ethics review. No one said where he went. No one said if he'd be back. But those of us who'd seen how the system digests men like him knew he was gone. Not fired, not flamed, just absorbed into the bureaucratic fog and forgotten. What surprised me wasn't how fast it happened. It was how fast the pivot came next. 3 days after the suspension, Evelyn Wu called my CEO directly. The call lasted 9 minutes. Afterward, my CEO walked into my office, shut the door, and sat down like she'd just been handed a new universe to map. She told me that the Oversight Division, the same team that had watched Craig implode in real time, was offering us a smaller but direct private contract. Infrastructure consultancy. No middlemen, no pitch circus. Quiet money, long-term trust, clean channels. Not 480 million wino, but high margin, stable, and more importantly, ours alone. They didn't want flash. They wanted competence, documentation, systems that wouldn't collapse because one man needed to be the loudest in the room. In other words, they wanted what I'd quietly built while someone else tried to bury me under his ego. I didn't say much in that meeting, just nodded, took the new draft, read the red lines, noted the clause they'd added near the back. All vendor-facing personnel must comply with Section 14 standards. Breach will result in contract voidance without arbitration. It was basically the Donnelly clause, written so it'd never happen again. There was no applause, no champagne, no headline, just a quiet moment where I walked back to my desk, opened the new folder, and moved everything from Donnelly interactions into an encrypted archive. Closed the tab, sat back. Closure doesn't always feel like justice. Sometimes it just feels like the absence of resistance. No more fire to put out, no more breath to hold. Just the stillness after impact when you realize the system worked, not because it wanted to, but because someone held the line long enough for the truth to catch up. I didn't need vindication. I didn't need a parade. I needed Craig out of the way. And now, he was. 3 months later, a single-line update appeared in the agency's public staffing directory. Craig Donnelly, status terminated. No press release, no scandal, no fall from grace expose to splash across the procurement gossip blogs. Just a quiet erasure, like he'd never existed inside the system he once believed bent to his pedigree. I found out the same way everyone else did, buried in a Monday morning update packet from the Oversight Division. But unlike everyone else, I also got something more. A letter, handwritten, delivered in a plain envelope, no company seal, no return address, just my name. Inside was a single sheet of thick linen paper, signed by the chair of the Oversight Board. It wasn't long. It didn't gush. It simply said, "Sometimes systems only work because people like you insist they must. Thank you for holding the line." I didn't frame it. I didn't post it. I slid it into the back of my file drawer behind the project records and policy templates, not because I didn't value it, but because I didn't need it to prove anything. The proof was already baked into the new contract language. Section 7B, tucked neatly under the vendor conduct provisions. All vendor interactions are subject to review by prior named individuals with decision authority. One line. No bold font, no citation, but I knew what it meant. They'd written me into the system, not as a name, but as a safeguard. Quiet leverage, formalized. I never got public credit. The award ceremony skipped me. The press announcement named departments, not people, but I saw the compliance footnotes. I recognized the wording. I saw where the new policies mirrored the documents I'd spent nights curating. I saw where the teeth had been sharpened. That was enough. The final time I passed through the pitch wing of that glass building, I was headed to a smaller strategy session. Nothing flashy. I had my folder under one arm and a coffee in the other. As I walked past that gleaming room Craig once tried to claim, I paused for a second. The chairs had been rearranged, the screens replaced. The table looked bigger now somehow. Emptier, too. I didn't smile, I didn't sneer. I just walked on by, boots quiet on the marble floor, breath steady, heart unchanged, because power doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's just the right to walk out without looking back. You don't need to raise your voice when you're the one who signs the silence.